is a Cog Railway. All right, couple engineers, right? So, cog, it's got one cog that goes up the wheel that drives it up the hill?
Well, in theory, sort of. So the locomotives have two drive cogs, one what we call one up mountain and one down mountain. So on the forward set of wheels and on the back set.
Okay.
And the coach as well. There's a down mountain and an up mountain, but the coach has got braking cogs.
Okay.
Yeah. And the locomotive has both drive cogs and braking cogs.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Just like the sprocket and chain on your bicycle.
Right. A little bit bigger.
Only a lot beefier.
Yeah, this is the chain here, right in the middle.
Yeah, it's like a chain laying down flat.
And that goes all the way up. That's incredible.
You won't see that on Amtrak.
So who invented this Cog Railway thing?
Guy named Sylvester Marsh. On the way up, I'll tell you all the history.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. I'm getting too far ahead of myself.
That's okay.
Well, that's pretty cool.
We just celebrated our 155th anniversary.
150.
July 3rd. So yeah, this is not a roller coaster. This is like a piece of American and New Hampshire history.
Right. Certainly.
We'll have fun.
So which came first, the auto road or the Cog?
The auto road.
Auto road. So they used to take workers up, probably?
It was a stagecoach road. That was finished in what, 1863 or something?
I can't remember the date offhand. Yeah. Just a little before. A couple of years before they started doing railroads.
So I wonder if they used to bring the road workers up to the top on the Cog. Or if they just drove their horses
they all
up.
go up on the auto road.
Oh, the workers, yeah. But no, when they made the road.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear that? The engineers and all the tech guys said that is the best way for that road. I mean, for way back when they didn't have the technology.
Yeah.
They built it the best way.
Yeah.
To this day. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's this has a similar story. It's incredible how they figured all this out without
It really
modern
is.
technology.
I mean, and back in the 1800s, if you didn't have a tool, you didn't go to Home Depot. You made your tool, went to the blacksmith and said, I need this to do this. And they would make it. I think they were a lot smarter then.
Yeah. They weren't playing on their phones.
Right.
They were actually doing some work.
Right, exactly. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
So he didn't jump off the train. Turn around and look at our engineer, Mike. You can't see him, can you?
I see his arm.
Guess what? He can't see anything in front of the coach either. So besides being your entertainment up here today, I got a more important job, and that is to keep you safe. And that's what I'm doing on the platform. I'm out here keeping my eyes on the tracks, making sure there's no obstructions. And when we get up to the switches, I need to make sure they're set and locked properly so that we don't derail. So when you got out of my coach this morning, I bet you didn't realize your life was in my hands, did you? It's not that complicated. Now I'm going to show you something really White Mountains. If you look out your windows, and down below over here, you're looking at the Ammonoosuc River. Look how crystal clear that water is. It's naturally filtered, and it's spring-fed. And this river begins on top of the Ammonoosuc Ravine off the right front side of my coach. I'll point it out to you on the way up. And up on top of that ravine are the highest lakes east of the Mississippi River. They're called Lakes of the Clouds. And that's where this river originates, and it comes flowing down to our base station, then over to Littleton, New Hampshire, and on to Vermont, where it empties into the Connecticut River. And it flows all the way down the Connecticut River, emptying into Long Island Sound. Alrighty then.
I just thought about it. Give her something fun.
Good decision.
You're taking a picture. That's what we want.
Oh, these folks are walking down. They don't know it yet.
So right here, so they reroute the trail. It's like a
there sounding a horn to let us all know he has the pedal to the metal and we've reached our top speed. This is all you're going to get. This is it. Anyone know what our top speed is?
8 miles an hour.
About 4 or 5 miles an hour. Now this morning, I'm going to start off by telling you some history of our White Mountains. If we go back well over 1,000 years ago, or more, I don't know, the original inhabitants of the White Mountains were the Abenaki Indians. They were here centuries and centuries before anybody else. And it wasn't until the late 1700s when a family named the Crawfords arrived up here in sheer wilderness. That was the beginning of modern day civilization. Again, no railroads, no hotels, no roads, nothing, just sheer wilderness.
Suicidal bird!
They're kind of considered the pioneers of North Country. They did a lot to open up our land up here, including building the first road to connect Maine and Vermont. That opened up trade and commerce and population growth a little bit. And you actually took that road to come to the Cog Railway, Route 302. That's the road they built in the late 1700s.
Nice.
So it was a rough life up here for the next 50 years or so. And along came the railroads to New Hampshire. And they were cutting their way north to connect Canada to many of our major cities in the Northeast. So that was our big boom up here in trade and commerce and population growth. Also industry located up here. A lot of cities and towns sprung up. But surprisingly, it was the discovery of tourism around that time as well. Now the only people who could afford to come up here as tourists were the wealthiest people in our country. Families of the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Morgans and all their friends. They would come up here by train. They would ask to be let off in the White Mountains somewhere, and they would just wander off in our woods, and they'd go fishing, they'd go hunting for food, they'd go hiking. At the end of the day, they pitched their tents and they went camping. Now that didn't last very long. It also wasn't very popular with the wealthy ladies. Can you imagine Mrs. Rockefeller or Mrs. Vanderbilt down here laying in a tent? So what did they do? Over the next 20-some-odd years, they built 33 grand hotels up here, including the Mount Washington Hotel. How many of you are familiar with the Mount Washington Hotel? You want to see it on the way in? Well, we had 33 of those things. Several even larger than the Mount Washington Hotel. They're on both sides of the mountain. If you're familiar with the little village of Bethlehem, about 10 miles away, they had a dozen just in that little village. That was Grand Hotel City up here. There was even a Grand Hotel on our summit for 100 years before the current visitor center. Now these folks would show up by rail. They'd check in for the whole summer. And once they got settled, they threw their money around, trying to outdo and outspend each other, like they did down in Manhattan and Newport, Rhode Island, and Philadelphia, whatever. And next thing you know, the nickname of this, the White Mountains was the Gilded Age of the White Mountains. This was exclusively a playground for the wealthy. Regular people couldn't afford to come up here. Now that all changed with the after the Great Depression, with the popularization of the automobile. For the first time, a lot of regular people, they were driving up here. But they couldn't afford the exorbitant rates of our grand hotels, so they went camping. But you know, it was kind of a bigger thing by then. When you bought a Model T, there are a number of accessories you could buy, like an ice box, and a stove, and a tent, and that's what people did. They jumped in their car, they took off, and then they pulled over on the side of the road, pitched a tent, cooked a meal, went to sleep. Next morning, they packed everything up, and off they went to their next destination. So, before you know it, though, they built a lot of low-cost hotels and motels up here for that new market. Now, the wealthy people were also driving up here, and they changed this whole economy. What happened was, now that they had the mobility of their own automobiles, they no longer wanted to stay all summer. They just wanted to check in a few nights. And then now they could drive up to Montreal, or drive over to Bar Harbor, Maine, or drive down to Boston. And what happened was the occupancy rates dropped in our grand hotels almost overnight. They were 50% empty. and they couldn't cover their costs. And over the next few decades, that's how many of our grand hotels ended up going out of business, with the exception of a few. Now, tourism has continued to evolve to what it is today, which is New Hampshire's #1 industry, and also it's the state's largest revenue producer. So while I'm at it, I'd like to thank all of you for coming up to the White Mountains today and riding on the Cog Railway, especially if you're from out of state, helping us to keep those state income taxes away. Now I want to tell you a story about the history of our railway. This all began with Sylvester Marsh, born 1803, on a farm down by Waterville Valley. Now, from the day he was born, he was an entrepreneur. As a toddler, he was always taking things apart, putting them back together. When he got to be in his early teens, he was a whiz kid at fixing all the farm equipment. By the time he got to his late teens, his parents knew he was special. So they sent him down to Boston to the university to pursue an engineering degree. And once he completed that degree, turns out it was the gold rush in America. So rather than come back to agricultural New Hampshire with a degree that most likely he wouldn't be able to use, Sylvester hopped on a train and headed to California to seek a much larger fortune, like a lot of other people did during the gold rush. Now, he never made it to California. He made it only as far as Chicago. Is anyone from Chicago? No Chicago. Well, anyway, he's sitting in Chicago one morning, and he's looking out at the plains and all the wild livestock and how the transcontinental railway is quickly connecting our country. And he has like one of these eureka moments. He decides, I'm not going to California. There's plenty of opportunity here. So we settled in Chicago, where the population was just 300 people. Now, you know what his idea was? He was going to partner up with the railroads, and he was going to create America's largest and national meat packing operation, using the railroads to distribute his product throughout the entire country. Now, everybody laughed at him in Chicago, but guess what? Within 10 years, he was a multi-billionaire and the father of the entire meat packing industry in Chicago as we know it today, with the stockyards and the whole infrastructure that exists. And so again, he was a multi-billionaire within 10 years. So we stayed in that industry for a few more decades, and he built the largest meat packing operation in North America. And he became the equivalent of a billionaire. So by the mid-1800s, Sylvester decided to sell his company and come back east and retire. Now that didn't work out so well because he was always thinking of what he's going to do next. He was an entrepreneur. And he always came up with these wild and crazy ideas, but he had this magic of making them come to life and make a lot of money in the process. So while he got bored and he started looking for his next career. And while he was doing that, he hiked to the summit of Mount Washington one day. When he got up there, he could see 130 miles in every direction. And he has another one of his eureka moments. He's looking around and saying, you know what? Everybody should have the opportunity to enjoy what he was looking at. Now, previously, nobody went to the summit of Mount Washington. There was no hiking trails or nothing. So we hiked down, didn't say much to anybody, and about a month later, the billionaire bought up all this land, and he announced publicly that he was going to invent the world's first mountain climbing railway to the summit of Mount Washington for tourism. Everybody did. They laughed at him, especially the railroad industry. They called him a lunatic. They called him Crazy Sylvester. Who would want to throw their fortune away on an impossible project? And remember, it's still impossible even to this day. But Sylvester, once he had his mind made up, you weren't going to change him. He was an entrepreneur. He stuck to his vision. Took him about 10 or 12 years to figure this out. Went through a number of different technologies, and he failed and failed and failed over and over again. But like I said, his breakthrough came when he borrowed an idea from a bicycle, a sprocket chain, and he beefed it up and made a tabletop model, and he said, this is it. This is going to work. So, in 1866, by the way, that's the significance of the date on the side of your benches. 1866, that's when he rolled the dice. And he built his first prototype steam engine, integrating the cogs, and he built a set of tracks up to the water tank we just passed. That same year, he made it successfully up to the water tank, convinced himself that he could now tackle the summit. That same year, he incorporated as the Mount Washington Railway Company. And guess what? We still work for the same company today. How many companies in America can you think of that have been around since 1866? What kind of a hidden gem up here in the White Mountains? Now everybody was laughing at him, and they didn't notice the progress he had made. But they really thought he lost it when he said he was hiring 300 Civil War veterans to complete the tracks. And they did that in less than 3 years, without any power equipment, excavators, bulldozers, which is an engineering marvel even by today's standards. Now I'm going to pause for a minute. You got to check this out. This is one of our steam engines. This thing's been operating since 1904. This is the old school way of going to the summit. Takes a ton of coal, 1,000 gallons of water. Nothing like the sight, the sound, and the aroma of our steam engine.
Yeah.
So anyway, on July 3rd, 1869, that's the day in our history when Sylvester took his first coach of paying passengers safely up to the summit back. So since that date, we've taken millions of people to the summit, and we take over 130,000 people a year up here. And this has grown to become New Hampshire's most popular and largest tourist attraction. Now, like any new company, it didn't start up without its problems. And I love reading about our history so I can share some of it with you. But I came across a story that I thought was comical, although it probably wasn't if you were riding the Cog Railway. You go back to when we opened, the original coaches didn't have sides, just a canvas top. So all of our passengers were exposed to the weather and the elements. These buggy seats, or these seats back, by the way, they were buggy seats on leaf springs. They were level. And the only people who could afford to ride the Cog Railway were all these wealthy tourists that stayed in the grand hotels. They would come dressed in their Sunday best. The woman would be wearing their bustles and their long dresses and their Easter bonnets, and the men would have on suits and top hats and derbies. And guess what the first problem was that the Cog Railway had? Some of these wealthy people, on the way up the mountain, they were bouncing out of the coach. And on the way down, they were sliding out of their benches into a big pile halfway down. So the first thing they had to switch out were the seats, and they replaced them with these stationary benches that are crooked by design to accommodate the grades. Imagine bouncing out of this thing on your bustle, huh? everybody doing so far? Are your seats more comfortable? See, I told you so. And what happens on these grades, you become accustomed to them and you don't even realize how steep you're climbing up this mountain. And that's what I want to talk about next. I mentioned it briefly, but the average grade of our tracks is 25%. Now what that means is for every 100 feet we roll forward, we rise 25 feet. That is a steep grade. Some of you might have noticed a sign on the highway, caution, 4.5% grade. That's nothing to us. Our average is 25%. And up here we're going to be crossing a trestle that's almost 40% grade.
Oh, it's fine.
Now one interesting thing about our grades is that sometimes they can create illusions. I bet you didn't think you might have an illusion this morning on the Cog Railway. Maybe you will and maybe you won't. Let's see what happens. Well, we have a building coming up called the Halfway House, sitting up here at about 4,500 feet. Now there's a picture window in this halfway house facing our tracks. Get ready, everybody. When we pass by the halfway house, I want everybody to look out the right windows of our coach and into that picture window.
Looks like it's going downhill.
Get ready. What you're going to see is a reflection of our white coach. Look how steep we're climbing up this mountain. It doesn't feel that steep because you're in these crooked benches. Now, did everybody get a good look at the building itself? Everybody notice the building? Well, let me ask you another question. How many of you think that building back there was crooked? Put your hands up. Who thought that building was crooked? Who's lying? Well, thank you for being honest, a couple of you back there. If you put your hands up, congratulations, you had an illusion. That building is perfectly level. I put a marble on the floor of that building and it doesn't roll. It's used by our track crew. So now that you know the building's level, and you looked in the picture window, does someone want to tell me right now who is crooked? We are, right? What happens on these grades, seriously, your brain can interpret the information the exact opposite of reality, making you think something out there is crooked instead of you. So if you had an illusion, congratulations. There's no right or wrong answer. I will tell you, it happens to us all the time working here.
Good, you?
I don't point this out because only the people in the front can see it. Right ahead of us. See the white surfboard?
Yeah.
That's a side profile of the old man in the mountain. See it?
Oh, I see it, yeah. That's cool. Very
Natural
cool.
formation.
Natural.
It is natural, yeah. Other than the surfboard.
Yeah. And once you get this way, it doesn't show it.
Very cool, thank you.
Right around the bend, we're going to be crossing that trestle I told you about. It's called Jacob's Ladder. And when we get out on Jacob's Ladder, if you look out your windows, you're going to notice we're 35 feet off the ground. This is an elevated trestle, dealing with the rugged terrain of a mountain. Now also when we get out here, again, you may not notice it. In fact, I don't think you will notice it, but believe it or not, the grade out here is 37.41%. Now, hold on to that thought because I don't want you to miss the views off the right. That's the top of the Amanusic Ravine I mentioned. And that building is Lakes in the Clouds Hut. To the left of the building is Lakes in the Clouds. You can see the Amanusic River flowing down the face of the mountain. To the right of that building are the southern presidential mountains. Mount Monroe, Mount Eisenhower, Mount Franklin, and Mount Pierce. Now let's come back to this 37% grade. You guys realize how steep a 37% grade is?
Pretty steep.
No, you don't.
Well, 45 is.
For those of you that didn't have an illusion, I have one for you. I want everybody to look at the back floor of our coach right now.
Yeah.
The back floor of our coach is 14 feet lower than where I'm standing up here. Because we're going up the mountain just like this. But again, you can't feel it. You're in these crooked benches. 14 feet lower back there. Now, if you think that's something, we're going to do a little exercise together. Let me illustrate this first before you try it, okay? All eyes on me. I'm going to ask you to stand up and get in the center aisle. Hold on to the bench. Take a couple of steps backwards. And once you're feeling comfortable, I want you to let go of this bench and stand up nice and straight like me. Can everybody see how straight I'm standing up? No, it's not magic. It's insanity. You got to try this. Now, when you try it, make sure you put your feet together, and also make sure you lean forward so you don't tumble over backwards. Get up there, everybody. Don't be a chicken. How about that? Good job.
Damn. Like okay, back up. We're coming down. Holy moly. What the? Ain't that something? I know. Help me, I'm falling. Get it?
Good job, everybody.
Thanks
That's
for
what a
catching me.
37% grade for your life.
Yeah, that's pretty
It's
good.
actually a lot of work
It is.
to stand out here. You know how much work it is? If you stood there from the base to the summit without holding on to the bench, you would burn over 300 calories.
Let's do that.
Doesn't work for me. Might work for you.
Or for me. My legs would give out.
Now the other thing you might have noticed while you're trying to stand up straight, look at our trees. They're getting shorter and shorter and they're disappearing the higher we go up the mountain. This is all weather related. And once we get above our tree line,
We're giants.
all of our trees are going to disappear because they can't tolerate Mount Washington's world's worst weather. So yeah, once we get above a tree line, all these trees are going to disappear. Now another unique thing about Mount Washington, our tree line is only 5,000 feet. Anyone know what typical tree line is? If you went to the Rocky Mountains or the Alps or... 8,000. Yeah, 11 to 14,000 feet. Colorado at 10,000 feet, you got plenty of forest. On Mount Washington at 5,000 feet, you have nothing. Boulders. And again, that's because you're at the home of the world's worst weather. Now let me explain why we have the world's worst weather up here. First of all, Mount Washington is the highest peak in the northeastern part of our country. But more important than that, it happens to be perfectly situated directly in the path where every weather system in our country travels till it gets up to the summit and it collides with every other weather system. There's 4 major weather systems, about 25 or 30 minor weather systems. And some days, when we get a lot of weather systems going on throughout our country, when they collide, they create a single mega weather system that can create any weather, any day of the year. Including June, July, August, believe it or not, we can get snow, sleet, hail, fog, thunder and lightning, sunshine, rain, 100-mile-an-hour winds, or any or all of the above. Now back in 1934, the highest winds ever recorded on our planet were recorded on Mount Washington at 231 miles per hour. And the winter before this past one, they recorded the all-time lowest temperature, minus 109 below zero.
Good grief.
Fahrenheit?
What's that?
Is that Fahrenheit?
Yeah, minus 109 below zero with the wind chill factor.
Wow.
I think it was only minus 72, but when you add the winds to it, minus 109.
That's nuts.
So you put that all together, this is a popular mountain to hike. However, the weather can change like that, and it can turn very dangerous and deadly. We have over hundreds of rescues every year up here. The Cog Railway gets directly involved in those hiker rescues. Some days we have to bring up search and rescue teams or New Hampshire Fish and Game to go out and look for people. And unfortunately, we have 3 to 5 deaths every year up here. So again, this is a fun mountain, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can turn very deadly and dangerous. Now off the left side of our coach, you're looking at the northern presidential mountains. And that's Mount Clay, Mount Jefferson, Mount Adams with the Twin Peaks, and finally Mount Madison out there. And also, if you look out left, when you see the hiker, you'll see those triangular shaped piles of rocks. Those are what we call cairns. And the hikers stay on the trail by walking from cairn to cairn. Now that looks pretty simple today. Come up here in a snowstorm, you can't even see these cairns. Now that's the Gulf Side Trail they're on over there. And if we walked over to that Gulf Side Trail and just kept walking by those two hikers, we would walk off a 1,500-foot cliff.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what forms the Great Gulf. And in a moment, we'll be able to look right down the Great Gulf into northeastern, the mountains of northeastern New Hampshire and northwestern Maine. We have a look out the right side. We're above tree line. Everybody notice the trees are gone? The only thing that grows up here is alpine grasses, alpine flowers. Take a look at all the granite boulders. See the green fungus on them? That's actually a plant called lichen. Lichen is the only plant that can survive Mount Washington's world's worst weather. It grows on all our granite boulders all year round up here.
Like it or not.
So if you peek off your left, that's the Great Gulf. That whole valley down there is called the Great Gulf. We can see our final destination. Up there on the right side of my coach is the Sherman Adams Visitor Center, run by the state of New Hampshire. When we arrive today, you're going to have an hour to enjoy all the amenities inside the building and around the summit. Now on the main level of that building, there's restrooms, there's a post office, there's an indoor observation lounge where you see the windows. You can take in the views inside, or if it starts snowing, you can go in there and get out of the weather. And there's also a restaurant and a gift shop in that main level. Now make sure you get down to the lower level. There's a weather station down there, but also you're going to find the Mount Washington Observatory Weather Museum. And they have some pretty cool videos and exhibits of what it looks like up here during the different seasons. If we came back here in January and February, everything you're looking at out here is covered in about 6 or 8 feet of frozen snow. You have to walk on top of the snow. And you also need all kinds of specialized equipment like crampons, ice axes, avalanche poles, ropes, many layers of windproof and waterproof clothing. And you also see people hiking up here who are practicing for Mount Everest. And they love to come and practice on our mountain because many days during the winter, our weather can be more severe than what they'll encounter on Mount Everest, believe it or not. Most days it can be 20, 40, 60 below zero up here with the wind chill factors. Now also there's a second gift shop at that lower level. It's affiliated with the museum. You can buy books on the weather, you can buy weather instruments, and they also have branded clothing, MWO from Mount Washington Observatory. Now take a walk to the end of our tracks. You're going to see a building that's chained to the mountain so it doesn't blow off. That's the old Stagecoach building, and in there is a third gift shop run by the Auto Club. Now there's a historical sign on that building, very popular photography spot. That's the spot where they measured the 231-mile-an-hour winds. So you might want to take your picture next to that poster. Also, you want to take a walk in the back of the building. You'll see the Tip Top House. It was built in 1853 as the first shelter on Mount Washington. Still up here. Right next to the Tip Top House, listen up, this is really important. Next to the Tip Top House is the official geological summit of Mount Washington. You're going to see a sign that says Mount Washington, 6,288 feet, with a little path leading up to it. If you don't go up there and take a picture, then you didn't make it to the summit of Mount Washington. So make sure you do that. Now there's also a ramp behind there. If you walk up the ramp, it'll take you to the top of the building. See the people on top of the building?
Yep.
That's the outdoor observation deck. That's where you're going to get your best panoramic views.
Right there.
So make sure you spend some time outside. We got a beautiful day weather-wise.
Stop pushing me. Okay. All right.
Also wave to the people at home too. There's a
Yeah. Anybody from Georgia? Nobody from Georgia either, huh? Well, right here, where these hikers are, this is the Appalachian Trail. And if I let you out and you walk 1,850 miles that way, you'd end up at Springer Mountain, Georgia, where it originates. 300 miles the opposite direction is Mount Katahdin in Maine. This whole trail right here is 2,150 feet long, miles long, excuse me.
I'll walk it.
Big difference. Takes about 5 or 6 months to hike that trail. And I was reading with somebody, they ran this whole trail in 25 days.
What?
So we're going to be arriving at the summit very shortly. Let me kind of go through the logistics of what's going on here.